In that moment, the blond man turned toward her, lifted his rifle, and fired. The bullet caught Rachel in the chest and sent her staggering. As she fell, she cried out, a wail of pain and surprise. On the long journey west, she had worried about Indians and wolves, about stampedes that would trample them and flooding rivers that would carry their wagon away. But now that they were in California, she had thought her worries were over. How could this be happening now? She could feel hot blood seeping from the wound in her shoulder, wetting the rocky ground beneath her. The sunlight was warm on her face. The world seemed unnaturally bright and clear. In the distance, the blond man left his horse and began climbing the slope toward her. She could see her daughter standing by the stream. The little girl was gazing up at her, eyes round in sudden fear. "Mama?" Sarah said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the stream. "Run, Sarah," Rachel gasped. "Run and hide." Sarah knew how to run and hide. It was a game they had played together often. On the long journey across the prairie, the Indians that they had met had admired the child for her coppery hair. More than one chief had wanted to trade for her, offering William buffalo robes and ponies. That was when Rachel had taught Sarah to run and hide, to find a place that was out of sight and come out only when her mother called. "Run and hide, Sarah," Rachel gasped and prayed the good Lord would protect her daughter. "Run and hide. Hurry." She closed her eyes against the sunlight. Sarah scrambled among the boulders, searching for a place to hide. She squeezed between two boulders and found a slab of granite leaning against a rocky patch of hillside, making a tiny cave. She slid through the opening, which was just big enough to admit her, and crouched in the cool shadows, her heart pounding with fear. Through the opening, she could see the tent, see her mother lying on the ground. The man had a knife in his hand and a rifle under his arm. Sarah sat very still, motionless in the darkness. As she watched, the man bent over her mother, with his back to Sarah. When he stood a few minutes later, he held a handful of bloody hair. He glanced around then, as if he felt eyes upon him, as if he feared someone had witnessed his crimes. For a moment, his eyes rested on the mouth of the cave where Sarah hid. Sarah did not move. She was crying, but she did not make a sound. Her mother had told her that she must be silent when she hid, as quiet as a mouse. She squeezed her eyes shut, not wanting to watch, not wanting to see what the man would do next. When she opened her eyes, he had yanked her mother's quilts from the tent. Boxes of food were opened, spilling flour and beans onto the ground. He held up the feather bed, her mother's precious feather bed, and slashed it with his bloody knife. The wind caught the feathers and they swirled and danced above the boulders, flying away into the mountains. The man tossed the feather bed aside and turned away. Silent and motionless in the safety of the cave, Sarah watched him go. She stayed in the cave, hugging her knees for warmth and waiting for her mother to call her. She waited. She was very young. It seemed strange that her mother had fallen to the ground, but the world was filled with events that she could not explain. She could not come out until her mother called. Those were the rules. She closed her eyes and waited, her mind drifting like a feather on the wind. She listened to the roar of the stream as it flowed over the rocks, and the sound filled her head, washing away the sight of the man standing over her fallen mother. For a time she slept. When she woke, it was cold in the cave, and she was hungry. She squeezed through the opening into late afternoon sunshine and made her way to the tent. The spring air smelled of new leaves, pines, and freshly spilled blood. Her mother's body lay in front of the tent, Her scalp had been torn away, and the rocky ground beneath her head was dark and sticky with blood. The wound in her chest had bled freely as well, and a dark stain had spread across her dress. Sarah stood a few feet away, unwilling to approach too close. "Mama?" she said. In the past, when she made that sound, her mother had smiled and responded, but now the magic sound failed her. "Mama?" she said again, louder this time. "Mama!" A shout that echoed from the valley walls. "Mama!" She ran to her mother's side and tugged on her hand. The skin was cold to the touch. The hand was stiff and unyielding. As the shadows grew long, Sarah crouched beside her mother's body, her small fists clutching the faded calico dress, her face wet with tears. The hill to the west cast a shadow that engulfed the weeping girl. Sarah, chilled in the evening air, huddled by her mother's side, shivering in the cold. The sun set, and the full moon rose, illuminating the valley with its cold, silver light. In a clearing up the hill from where Sarah waited, a she-wolf named Wanna sat on her haunches and lifted her head to howl at the rising moon. Her voice rose on a mournful note, stretched thin by the wind. The other members of the pack joined in, their voices singing in harmony. Wanna's teats were heavy with milk. Early that day she had gone hunting with the pack, leaving her pups in the care of a younger she-wolf. The hunt had gone well, the pack had brought down a young deer, and Wanna had eaten her fill. But when they returned to the den, the wind was scented with gunpowder and blood. The young she-wolf that they had left to guard the pups was dead by the mouth of the den, shot in the head. The pups lay beside her. They had been hauled from the den, and their throats had been slit. All the pups were dead on the ground. While the pack milled about in confusion, Wanna had licked the pups, trying to wash away the blood and bring them back to life. They were so young, their eyes barely open. She smoothed their soft fur with her tongue, cleaning them, trying to warm their cold bodies. Perhaps they only slept. If she tried, she might wake them. Her mate Roland and the other members of the pack milled around her. Buried in the den where the pups had been hidden was a wooden box that stank of man sweat. In the bushes below the den there was a dead man, one of the two men who had carried that box. The dead man had been shot, and he had fallen face down in the bushes. The other man, the man who had left the scent of his hands on the bodies of her dead pups, had ridden away. The smell of horses lingered in the bushes where the animals had been tied. Roland had begun to follow the killer, but Wanna would not go with him. She had stayed with her pups, lying beside them and offering her teat so that they might suckle. She nudged the largest one with her head, a black male, the color of Roland. She whimpered to them, a low, plaintive sound, but they did not respond. There was no life in them. Despite her efforts, the pups lay still. Now night had come, and the moon had risen. Wanna knew that the pups would not wake from their terrible sleep. She had followed Roland away from the den and up a small trail that stank of man scent. In a clearing by the dead trunk of a lightning-struck pine, Wanna had stopped, raised her muzzle to the moon, and howled, a mournful cry that echoed through the valley. When she paused to take a breath, she caught a scent on the wind. Gunpowder and blood, human blood this time, and the same stink of man-sweat that lingered by the den and on the trail. She stood for a moment, growling low in her throat, then set off in the direction of the scent. Roland and the other members of the pack followed. Less than a mile from the den she saw the tent, a flapping white thing on the side of the hill. That's where the scent of man-sweat was strongest. The man scent was old, the man was gone, but mixed with the scent of blood was the warm